Photos are for insiders, my mother said as she nudged me from the family portrait and pointed toward the alcove by the sculpture. I just nodded. Speeches passed. Wine flowed. Then the waiter brought the bill, $3,200. I smiled and said, I won't fund strangers. Try whoever's in the picture. It was the third Saturday of the month. I remember because the Uber driver who dropped me off was complaining about the weekend surge pricing the whole way up the mountain. The estate was perched high above Calabasas, white stucco walls gleaming in the sun like some modern-day temple to money and self-importance. Cars were lined along the private drive like showroom models. Bentleys, Teslas, 2 vintage Porsches. My dusty Honda Civic felt like an insult to the valet stand, so I asked to park it myself. My name is Nathan. I'm 36. I live in Pasadena. I hadn't even stepped onto the patio before my mother spotted me. She wore a linen dress and oversized sunglasses like she'd just stepped off a yacht. Her smile was automatic, like something she'd practiced in the mirror. Oh, sweetheart, she said, brushing my cheek with a kiss that didn't touch skin. We're just about to start photos. I nodded. Great, I'll just. She caught my arm gently, but firmly. Family photos, Nathan. Just the core group. I blinked. I am family. Her smile didn't flinch. Photos are for insiders. The words hit me like a slap. Not shouted, not cruel. Worse. Practiced. Scripted. Like she'd rehearsed how to redirect me just in case I tried to belong. I didn't say anything. Just nodded and walked away, past the pool and down a hallway until I found a quiet alcove near the coat check. There was a bronze statue beside a tufted bench, a faceless woman wrapped in twisted sheets of metal. I sat there, half in shadow, watching them pose for the photographer through the glass wall. My cousin Chase stood front and center, his arms around both his parents. He wore a maroon blazer over a black tee and had that smug, artsy grin like he knew this would end up in a magazine someday. My aunt dabbed her eyes. My uncle clapped him on the back. The backdrop was a banner that read, "To Vision, to Tribe, Celebrating Embers in Milan." That was the name of the short film Chase had gotten into some indie festival in Italy. Nothing huge, mid-tier at best, but you'd think he won an Oscar the way everyone was acting. What nobody mentioned, of course, was who paid for all of it. The red Komodo camera, the editing rig, the MacBook Pro with Max specs, me. Every piece of gear Chase used to shoot that jittery, pseudo-poetic short film was bought with a credit card that had my name on it. When he said he was starving for his art, I paid for the groceries. When he needed a place to edit, I let him crash in my guest room for 3 months. I didn't do it for credit, not at first, but when I walked into that gallery and saw the tribute wall, a looping video of Chase talking about how nobody ever believed in me except myself, I felt something sour rise in my chest. No mention of me, not even a thank you on the program brochure. A waiter passed by and offered me a glass of something sparkling. I took it, barely tasting the bitter citrus as I swirled it in the flute. The coat check girl gave me a sympathetic smile, like she'd seen it all before. The guy who paid for the party but wasn't invited to dance. I checked my phone. Nothing. No one noticed I was gone. No one cared. They laughed loudly as the photographer snapped shots. Inside jokes I wasn't part of, stories that excluded me by default. Every time someone clinked a glass or offered a toast, it was to Chase, the prodigy, the rising star. And me? I was just the guy in the hallway, sitting beside a statue, sipping resentment through a sugared rim. My mother walked past once, on her way to powder her nose. She caught my eye but didn't stop, just smiled vaguely and said it again, like it was some kind of mantra. Photos are for insiders, Nathan. Then she disappeared around the corner, and I was alone again. Dinner was held at a boutique restaurant in Echo Park, the kind that didn't bother with signage, just a matte black door and a host who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The interior was all exposed brick and Edison bulbs, like every dish needed to be eaten under a light bulb from a Pinterest board. We had the private dining room, of course, nothing but the best for Chase. A chalkboard by the door read, "Tonight's curated tasting experience, earth, smoke, and cinema." Pretentious even for LA. Inside, the room buzzed with that fake warmth rich families manufacture when they want to pretend they like each other. Long table, minimalist centerpieces. Everyone already halfway through their first glass of something organically fermented in Georgian clay. Chase was in his element, seated in the middle like he was chairing a UN summit. His blazer was now paired with a scarf, despite it being 75 degrees outside, and he held his wine like a weapon of enlightenment. I took a seat near the end, across from my cousin Megan, who gave me a quick nod but didn't say anything. The chair next to me stayed empty. Figures. The waitstaff glided in, serving dishes that looked more like science projects than food. First was a beet foam amuse-bouche, followed by a scallop in ash broth served inside a hollowed-out sea urchin. People moaned dramatically at every bite. I stared at my plate and wondered what the check would look like. About halfway through the meal, Chase stood and tapped his glass. "I just want to say," he began, his voice full of practiced humility, "that this film, this journey, wasn't just about art. It was about survival, about tribe, about what it means to create in a world that tries to break you." A few people murmured approval. My mother dabbed at her eyes like she was watching the last scene of Dead Poets Society. "I couldn't have done this without my people," he went on. "My family, who always believed in me, who never once doubted that I could rise." I felt my jaw tighten. He raised his glass. "To vision, to tribe." The table erupted in toasts. I lifted my glass just enough not to stand out. He sat down to applause. No mention of the guy who fronted the entire camera rig. No acknowledgement of the person who kept him fed when art didn't pay the bills. The entrees came next, obscure things, duck hearts and foraged mushrooms, some kind of fermented wheat risotto that smelled like damp socks. I pushed it around my plate. No one noticed. They were too busy raving about the mouthfeel of a wine described as aggressively mineral-forward. Then came the final course. Dessert was a single cube of deconstructed tiramisu, which tasted like chocolate air and regret. Chase was telling some story about how he filmed one scene by candlelight, because art demands restriction, and my aunt nearly wept. That's when the bill arrived, not with a thud, not slapped onto the table, just a quiet envelope, slipped discreetly in front of me by a waiter who didn't even look up. Like this was protocol. I blinked, opened it, $3,217. I sat still for a second, long enough for Megan to glance down and shift uncomfortably. Chase didn't look my way. Neither did my mother. Then I heard it, the softest sound, a smirk in audio form. My uncle chuckled under his breath. "Hope the business is doing well. Nathan, that did it." I set the bill down calmly, took a long sip of water. Then I said it, just loud enough to cut through the hum of conversation. "You know what, Mom?" I said, turning to her. "Photos are for insiders." The room froze. Chase paused mid-sentence. My aunt looked up from her wine like I'd spoken a foreign language. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "I think it's time I stopped paying for things I'm not allowed to be part of," I added, sliding the bill slowly across the table, right to Chase. "What's that supposed to mean?" my mother asked, blinking. "It means I'm not covering this," I said. "Not tonight. Not anymore." Silence. Cold and clean. "You always pay," Chase said, like he was stating a law of nature. "Not tonight. You're making a scene," my mother snapped, suddenly sharper. "No," I said calmly. "I'm just making a choice." There were no offers to split it. No one reached for their wallet. Just a stunned, collective realization that the ATM was closed. Chase tried to smile. "You're kidding, right?" I stood up, buttoned my jacket. "I'm not." And with that, I walked out, left the bill, the wine, the tribe, all of it, sitting there under the warm glow of a rented chandelier. As the doors swung closed behind me, I swear I heard someone say my name. But I didn't turn around. Let the insiders figure it out. I hadn't even made it halfway to the car when my phone lit up. The screen was a flood of notifications, missed calls, messages, voicemails, like they all just discovered I had a number they could use for something other than wiring money. First was my brother. "Josh, what the hell was that? You embarrassed the entire family." Then my sister. "Danielle? Seriously? Manipulating everyone like that? That was low, even for you." And then, right on cue, my mother. "Mom, you've shamed this family. I don't know how you sleep at night. I didn't raise you to be so spiteful." Each text hit like a slap, but not one of them asked why I left, or how I felt. Just accusations, just outrage, the kind that bubbles up when the golden goose finally flies off the porch. I sat in my car for a moment, the engine off, just staring at the dashboard. The silence around me felt strange. Not peaceful, not yet, but empty, like a room that used to hold noise and now just echoed with the absence of it. A voicemail came in from Josh, and I hit play, mostly to confirm what I already knew. "Hey, so I guess you're done pretending, huh? You made your point, but don't expect to come around next month like nothing happened. You're out. Don't bother showing up for Dad's birthday." I deleted it before it finished. I should have been angry. I should have felt righteous. But what I actually felt, sitting there in the dim parking garage under that overpriced restaurant, was relief. A dull, exhausted kind of relief. Like I'd just stopped holding my breath after 36 years. This wasn't rebellion. I wasn't sticking it to anyone. This was escape. For the first time in years, I had said no, and meant it. No more funding holidays I wasn't invited to. No more covering emergencies that magically appeared every time someone's lifestyle got ahead of their paycheck. No more quiet resentment packaged in polite smiles and Venmo transfers. I went home, put my phone on Do Not Disturb, and poured myself a glass of whiskey. The messages kept coming. They started subtle: guilt, confusion, disbelief, then turned bitter. You're punishing everyone just because you weren't in a few pictures? Grow up, Nathan. It's not always about you. You were never a real part of this family anyway. Just the bank account we had to tolerate. That last one wasn't even signed, but I knew who it was from. The tone was familiar, like a hand that used to pat your back while slipping into your wallet. I didn't respond, not to any of them, because suddenly, I could see it all clearly. Every party, every dinner, every check I'd written to keep them happy. All of it was me begging for a seat at a table I never truly belonged to. And they never let me forget it. Photos are for insiders. That phrase played in my head over and over like a looped soundtrack to my childhood. To every moment I smiled while they forgot my birthday. To every time I helped someone get out of a jam, only to be talked about like a burden once I left the room. They didn't lose me that night. They never really had me to begin with. I poured another glass, sat on the couch, watched the light from the street lamps stretch long shadows across the wall. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just exhaled. It was over. And for the first time in my life, I was done chasing a family that never chased me back. It started small, like most things do. An email from my brother's mortgage lender landed in my inbox a week later. Not directly to me, of course. It was a forward from Josh with a note that said, "Can you just take care of this month? We're short because of that whole thing at the dinner." That whole thing. Like it was a parking ticket I refused to pay, not a lifetime of being treated like a line item on someone else's budget. I didn't reply. I didn't even open the PDF attachment. A few days later, my sister Danielle texted, "Hey, just a heads up, we're planning a birthday thing for Mom next month. Can you help with the deposit for the venue? They want half up front." No, how are you? No acknowledgement of the fallout. Just the usual soft entitlement dressed up as family tradition. I left it on read. Then came the real collapse. First, I got a notification from the insurance app. Auto policy canceled. Payment failed. 3 minutes later, a call from my sister's number. I didn't answer. Then a voicemail from her. Voice high-pitched and frantic. "Nathan, the insurance got cut off? Did you forget? My car is on that policy. Mom's too. This isn't funny. Just fix it, okay?" But I didn't forget. I canceled it. Just like I canceled the family phone plan. Just like I revoked access to the cloud storage they all used for free. Just like I shut down the Netflix account they shared like it was community property. For years, I'd quietly paid for everything behind the scenes. No one ever said thank you. Hell, no one even remembered whose name was on the bill. But the moment the lights went out, metaphorically and literally, I became public enemy number one. They started showing up in my inbox like bill collectors. I can't log into the family calendar anymore. What's going on? Why is my phone saying the plan is inactive? Netflix says the account doesn't exist. Did it get hacked or something? No one said you cut us off. Just questions. Probing. Like they were hoping it was all some mistake. A glitch in the generosity matrix. It wasn't. They weren't sad. They weren't sorry. They were inconvenienced. And the tone of their messages shifted quickly. "We trusted you to handle these things. Real families don't pull this kind of crap over a dinner tab. Unreal. You're sabotaging everyone just because you didn't get clapped into a family photo like you're some goddamn war hero." I read them all in silence, eating takeout on my couch like it was just another Tuesday. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. People don't notice the floor until it disappears beneath them. They don't notice the guy paying the Wi-Fi bill until their kids can't stream cartoons. They don't notice the car insurance until the renewal fails and they get pulled over. And not once, did anyone say they were sorry. Not for the photo. Not for the years of using me like an emotional and financial failsafe. Instead, my mother sent me a message that almost made me laugh out loud. "You've made your point, Nathan, but punishing your family is a choice you'll regret someday. Don't let pride cost you everything." Everything. That word stuck with me. Like everything was still in my possession. Like I hadn't already given them the best parts of myself for over a decade. I closed the message. Didn't reply. Later that night, I stood in my kitchen, pulling the plug on the shared Dropbox account they'd been using to store every family photo for the last 10 years. No warning. No backup. It was the first time I'd ever deleted something without double-checking. And it felt good. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I was finally learning how to let go. Not of people, of weight, of the constant, aching pressure to hold up a world that never made room for me in its pictures. I had known for years about the trust. Dad set it up back when I was in college, his legacy, he called it. The Turner Family Fund. It wasn't enormous, but it was steady, well invested, and structured to benefit all of us equally. On paper, anyway, I was the one he'd named executor. Back when I still thought that meant something honorable. Back when I still believed I was being trusted, not tasked. For a while, I didn't touch it. I just let the money move where the paperwork told it to. Quarterly disbursements, tax reports, auto transfers to my siblings' accounts. Quiet, dependable money they didn't even remember came through me. But after the dinner, after the fallout, after the full week of being ignored unless someone's subscription stopped working, I looked closer, and that's when I found it. Line item after line item marked Chase reimbursement, all approved manually by my mother. Not once, not twice. 9 separate transactions over the past year. Over $27,000 siphoned from the trust into my cousin's account under vague notes like creative expenses, artist stipend, and once, hilariously, emotional burden support. I traced the IP logins, all done from my mother's house, all under her credentials. She'd been dipping into the legacy fund for her golden boy nephew behind my back. I could have yelled. I could have confronted her with screenshots and legal threats, but I didn't. Instead, I did the one thing none of them expected. I dissolved the trust. I pulled my share out, transferred it into a clean account, and locked it down. Then I sent legal notices to every beneficiary, including my mother, including Chase, informing them that as the executor, I was exercising my right to terminate the agreement due to misuse of funds and breach of oversight. The reactions came fast. Danielle texted, "This is fraud. You're stealing from your own family." Josh emailed, "You can't just kill Dad's legacy because you're having a tantrum." Even Chase chimed in, "Hey man, I didn't know about any of that, but can we talk before you go nuclear? I have a shoot coming up that kinda depends on." I blocked his number. Then I turned my attention to the duplex. It was a modest 2-unit place in Eagle Rock that I bought 5 years ago as a quiet investment. I let my mother and Danielle move in after Mom lost her job and my sister's condo flooded. I charged them nothing. I paid the property taxes, the utilities, even covered repairs when the hot water went out last winter. They called it the family place, made it sound like it belonged to all of us. But it didn't. It belonged to me. And now, I was done pretending otherwise. I drafted formal eviction notices, complete with legal backing, and hand-delivered them in separate envelopes. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't include a letter explaining why. The message was simple. You don't get to live in a home you treat like a favor. You don't get free shelter from someone you refuse to acknowledge. 2 days later, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. "Nathan, what is this? You can't be serious. This house is our home. You're really going to throw your own mother out?" She paused, voice cracking. "This is about Chase, isn't it? Look, I helped him because he needed it. He's an artist. You have a job. You don't need the money." That was always the justification. If I wasn't drowning, I must be fine. And if I was fine, then they were entitled to every piece of me they could carve off. Danielle's message was nastier. "You petty little tyrant. You're kicking us out because your ego got bruised at a dinner table. Hope you enjoy dying alone in a big empty house." It was almost poetic, how quickly their grief turned to venom. Not because they were losing shelter, but because they were losing access. Still, not one apology. Not one acknowledgement of the years I kept the lights on. Not one word about the trust being drained behind my back. They weren't heartbroken. They were just exposed. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel guilty for saying no. I felt like someone finally closing a door that should have been locked a long time ago. The lawsuit hit like a shove in the back, sudden, stupid, and cowardly. It came wrapped in a manila envelope, hand-delivered to my office on a Tuesday morning. The receptionist poked her head into my door, looking confused. Some guy just dropped this off. No name, no firm. I opened it. 4 pages of legal nonsense. Case number 24 to 99,847. IP infringement and breach of verbal contract. Filed by a former business associate I hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 years. Some guy named Trevor who once pitched me a laughably half-baked app idea over drinks and thought that meant we were co-founders. I'd turned him down. Never even touched a line of code for him. Now, apparently, I'd stolen his concept, monetized his intellectual property, and refused him due compensation. It was absurd, baseless, a cheap attack, but the timing was perfect for everyone but me. Within an hour of the court documents landing on my desk, I noticed the ripple. A vague tweet from a second cousin. "Wow, money really does change people." #disappointed. A Facebook post from a family friend. "Just heard about what happened to Trevor. Unbelievable how success can twist someone's morals." Then came the group chat leak. Screenshots were forwarded to me from a mutual friend, a family group text. the one I hadn't been included in for months. The tone was brutal. Danielle, he finally got what's coming. Maybe a judge can humble him. Josh, he burned everyone who ever helped him. Trevor's just the first to push back. And then, of course, my mother, the queen of passive-aggressive scripture. It's karma. That's all I'll say. No one asked for the truth. No one called to check on me. They didn't want facts. They wanted a show. And now that I wasn't footing the bill, they were happy to watch me squirm for free. I didn't respond. Not to the posts. Not to the gossip. Not to the cousin who messaged, "You good?" just to stir the pot. Instead, I lawyered up. The thing about being the reliable one, the boring one, the numbers guy, the guy behind the curtain, is that people forget what you actually do. I wasn't just a passive checkbook or a human credit card. I built companies. I read contracts for breakfast. And this lawsuit, it was laughably easy to dismantle. Trevor had no paperwork, no patent filings, not even a damn email with my name on it. His claim was like a toddler's crayon drawing passed off as a blueprint. My attorney submitted a motion to dismiss within 72 hours. Attached screenshots, emails, date-stamped Slack conversations, all showing I'd never touched his idea, never agreed to build anything, never even entertained it beyond that one drunk conversation over fries. Still, it dragged for 2 months. Publicly, the family ate it up like reality TV. At one point, Danielle posted a story of her sipping champagne with the caption, "Here's to clean slates and hard lessons." Josh tweeted a meme of a sinking ship with the caption, "Captain Nathan, how's that iceberg taste?" Even my mother got her jab in during brunch with her church group, telling someone loud enough to be overheard. Well, he always did think he was smarter than everyone. Sometimes life teaches you the hard way. It was surreal. Not a single one of them asked me if I was okay. Not one reached out privately to say, "This seems off." They just saw blood in the water and circled like sharks with wine glasses. I kept my mouth shut. Let them laugh. Let them whisper. Because while they were busy playing courtroom commentators, I was building my counter. By the time the judge officially dismissed the case, with prejudice, no chance of refiling, I already had a civil suit drafted for legal expenses, defamation, and malicious intent. Trevor ended up owing me nearly 20 grand. He tried to apologize, left a voicemail that started with, "Bro, it was just business," and ended with, "I didn't think you'd actually fight back." I didn't reply. I just let the court documents do the talking. And when the judgment hit public record, it was my turn to watch the silence roll in. Danielle deleted her champagne post. Josh locked his Twitter account. My mother? She called me. I let it go to voicemail. "Nathan, I heard, everything's fine now, right? Well, I knew you'd land on your feet. You always do. Call me." I didn't, because I had landed on my feet, taller than ever. And the weight I'd been carrying, the burden of being the family's invisible safety net, I'd finally dropped it. Let them sit in their quiet now. Let them taste the silence they tried to serve me. I didn't just win the case. I won the clarity. They weren't my tribe. They were tourists, visiting my life when it suited them, leaving when it didn't. Now the gates were closed, and I was richer, in every sense that mattered. I waited until the dust had truly settled, not just from the lawsuit, but from the years of slow erosion that had turned my family into a pack of entitled strangers. Once the call stopped, once the posts dried up, once the outrage became background noise, I sat down and made one last decision. I opened a new account at a credit union, named it something boring, Emergency Discretionary Fund, loaded it with a little over $30,000, not enough to fix their lives, but enough to keep the lights on, pay a month's rent, maybe cover a hospital bill, a final olive branch. But it came with a lock. I emailed the link and terms to each of them individually: Mom, Danielle, Josh, even Chase. One paragraph, plain and simple. "If you need help, this fund exists. But there's only one condition: you have to meet me face to face. No calls, no texts, no middlemen. Sit down, talk like real people. That's the price." One conversation, one moment of honesty. No one replied. Not at first. A week passed. Then 2. I checked the fund balance every day. Still full. Still untouched. Then, one Thursday evening, as I was closing up my laptop, I heard a knock on the door. It was Uncle Darren. He wasn't really my uncle, second cousin, technically, but he was the only one in the family who never asked for anything, never took sides. Just an old-school guy who always shook my hand like he meant it. He stood on my porch wearing a windbreaker and holding a 6-pack of the cheap local beer he knew I liked. I opened the door without saying a word. He just nodded and said, "Mind if I sit?" We didn't talk about the fund right away. We sat on the patio, drank a beer each, watched the sun bleed out behind the power lines. Finally, he cleared his throat. They're struggling, he said. I didn't answer. I went by your mom's place last week. Danielle's car's got a boot on it. Your brother's in some kind of weird crypto debt. Don't ask me what that means. I'm too old to understand that crap. But none of them are doing well. Still, I said nothing. He looked at me. They know about the offer. Yeah, he nodded. They talk about it. But no one's going. They're too proud. I took a sip of my beer. Let it sit in my mouth. Warm and bitter. Uncle Darren shrugged. I told your mom to go. Told her to swallow it. Talk to you. She said, and I quote, I will not beg for scraps from someone who used to be my son. I didn't flinch. She still thinks this is about money, I said. It never was. He nodded. I know that. We sat there in silence for a while. When he finally stood to leave, he turned to me and said, You were right to cut them off. Just don't let their pride become your legacy too. Then he was gone. That night, I stared at the fund page for an hour. The numbers hadn't changed. Not a single transaction. Not even a login attempt. It was quiet. Too quiet. No one wanted to talk. Not if it meant facing themselves in the process. They wanted comfort, not accountability. And that's what finally broke whatever thread was left in me. Not the betrayal, not the lies, not the greed, but the refusal to show a shred of humility. I left the fund untouched, kept it open, a silent test they continued to fail every single day. And slowly, I let go of the idea that they'd ever change. Because the truth was clear now. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted a refund. It was late January when they came. I remember because the yard was still crusted with frost, and the heat inside my house kicked on louder than usual. I had just made coffee, thinking the quiet was going to last. Then came the sound of gravel crunching outside, followed by the doorbell, 3 firm rings, no hesitation. I opened the door, and there they were. My mother, Danielle, Josh, and Chase, all standing on my front porch like actors in a poorly rehearsed play. Danielle held a tote bag. My mother clutched an envelope. Chase looked like he hadn't slept. Josh had that puffed-up posture he always used when he wanted to seem in control. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then my mother gave a tight smile, the kind you wear to funerals and forgiveness parties. We brought some things, she said, lifting the envelope. Danielle stepped forward and pulled out a photo album, one of the old ones, with the sticky pages and yellowed edges. She flipped it open. Remember this? She said, holding up a picture of us at the beach. I was maybe 10, covered in sand, smiling wide like I didn't know better. We thought it might help, she added, as if the past could be traded like currency. Chase stepped in next. Look, I know I didn't handle things the right way. I was just under a lot of pressure with the film. I raised a hand. Stop. Everyone froze. You don't have to do this, I said. You didn't come here for closure. You came because you're out of options. Josh snorted. That's not fair. No. I looked at him. You said I was out. You told me not to come back. So what changed? The rent past due? The car repo finally catch up to you? Danielle flinched. We didn't come to fight. Then why are you here? I asked. My mother stepped forward now, her voice soft, almost trembling. We thought maybe we could talk. Just be together for a little while. No tension, no grudges. I stared at her, waiting. But nothing came after that. No apology. No ownership. Just vague hope wrapped in a cardigan and sentiment. You still think this is about one night, I said. She looked confused. Isn't it? No, I said flatly. It's about every time you needed something and I gave it. Every birthday I paid for. Every dentist bill. Every, just this once, that became every single time. And when I finally drew the line, you called it betrayal. We were hurting, Danielle said. So was I snapped. And not once did anyone stop to ask how I was doing. You were so used to taking, you didn't notice you'd hollowed me out. Chase held up his hands. Can we just restart? Pretend none of that happened? No, I said, because it did. Josh scoffed. So what? You want us to beg? Get on our knees in your living room and tell you were right? No, I said. I want you to take responsibility. To admit you treated me like an account balance instead of a person. I want one of you to say the word sorry and actually mean it. The silence was deafening. My mother looked down. Chase shifted. Danielle opened her mouth, then closed it. Josh crossed his arms. That was the answer. I turned, walked to my side table, and picked up a stack of letters I had written weeks ago, sealed in white envelopes with their names printed neatly on the front. I handed them out, one by one. What is this? Danielle asked. Formal notices of estrangement, I said, and documentation of my final decision. My mother paled. You're serious? I looked her in the eye. Completely. Chase stared at his letter like it was radioactive. What does this mean? It means this door, I said, gesturing behind me, is closed. Legally, emotionally, permanently. But my mother whispered. I already gave you one final offer, I said. You chose your pride. So now I choose my peace. Josh stepped forward. You're really going to do this over money? I laughed short. bitter, joyless. It was never about money. It was about respect. And the moment I stopped being your ATM, you showed me exactly how little I ever had. They didn't argue after that. Just stood there in the cold, holding letters they never thought they'd receive from the person they always expected would cave. As they turned to leave, my mother hesitated at the steps. "What will people think?" she asked quietly. I looked at her. "I don't care." Then I shut the door gently, finally. And on the other side, I stood in the stillness. Alone, unburdened, free. I sold the house in March. Not mine, the house. The one I grew up in. The one where I learned to ride a bike in the cracked driveway, and where my dad used to measure our heights in pencil marks on the pantry door. The one that, for a while, held all the good memories before it became the backdrop for everything they chose to forget. Legally, I'd inherited it after my father passed. My mother had lived in it rent-free since, under the quiet agreement that I'd keep the place going in his name. But the agreement wasn't written, and after what happened this winter, I saw no reason to keep pretending I owed anyone a shrine. The realtor thought I was joking when I told her I wanted it remodeled completely. I handed her the funds and the floor plans, signed over power of design, and walked away. Nothing should look familiar, I told her. Not one room. By the time it went on the market in April, the hardwood was gone. The faded brick exterior had been painted charcoal gray, with sharp black window frames and minimalist landscaping. They knocked out the kitchen walls, opened up the living room. Even the backyard, where we used to have family cookouts, had been flattened, stripped of the rusting swing set and cracked concrete patio. I toured it once, just to be sure, walked through each room like a stranger in someone else's home. And that's exactly what it felt like. No ghosts, no guilt, just space. The day after it sold, I sent the full proceeds, every penny, to a nonprofit foundation I'd quietly partnered with months earlier. They support creative youth from unstable homes, kids with ideas, drive, and no safety net. Kids who need a hand before they start making compromises just to survive. I wrote the check without flinching. No ceremony, no press release, just a quiet transfer and an email to the director. "Please don't name anything after me. Just use it well." They replied 2 days later, thanking me, said the funds would support housing, scholarships, and grants for aspiring filmmakers. That part made me laugh. Chase probably would have called it irony. Let him. As for the family, the distant ones, a few started reaching out, cautiously, respectfully. A second cousin messaged me on LinkedIn. A niece from out of state wrote a handwritten letter, said she'd heard stories, didn't know what was true, but wanted to know me anyway. I read her letter twice. Then I called her. We met for coffee a week later. She was 21, majoring in photography. Said she was tired of pretending everyone in the family was okay just because nobody wanted to be the first one to say otherwise. "I heard you left," she said, "but it sounds more like you stepped out of the fog." I smiled. "Yeah, that's what it feels like." I didn't close myself off after that. I didn't become cold or bitter. I just got better at recognizing the difference between people who wanted to be close and people who just wanted access. There's a difference. And now, I let that difference guide me. The legacy I built isn't a name on a house. It's not a trust fund. It's not a holiday dinner with hollow laughs and split checks. It's freedom. It's choice. It's offering help only where there's honesty. And it's knowing that closure doesn't always come from a conversation. Sometimes, it comes from tearing down the old place and using the bricks to build something better for someone who'll actually appreciate it. It was a quiet Tuesday night when it hit me. The kind of night where the house is still, and the only sound is the slow hum of the refrigerator and the faint hiss of wind through the trees outside. I had just turned off the TV, some documentary I wasn't really watching, and found myself standing in the hallway, staring at the old armchair by the window. I hadn't noticed it in months. Same faded upholstery, same sag in the cushion where I always sat when visiting family events. And suddenly, I was back there, at that art gala in Calabasas, half hidden beside the bronze statue and the coat check, watching my family pose for pictures I was never meant to be in. Photos are for insiders. The phrase echoed in my chest like it had been waiting all this time to be heard again. Back then, I remember how small I felt sitting in that chair. Invisible, like I was just some accessory to their real lives, tolerated, but not included. I remember watching them lift their glasses, smile for the camera, all glowing in praise for my cousin's minor film, while I sat 20 feet away, the one who bought the equipment, paid the rent, covered the bills, and still didn't belong. That night, I felt humiliated. Now, standing in the same chair, just in a different house, I realized something. That wasn't the moment I was pushed out. That was the moment I walked away. I didn't know it then, but something inside me shifted when my mother said those words. Something quiet but permanent, like a gear locking into place. I started watching instead of giving, listening instead of pleasing, seeing clearly for the first time how the system had been built and how easily I could walk out of it. And I did. I cut off the money. I shut down the guilt. I faced the blowback, the smear campaign, the manipulations dressed as apologies. And I didn't fold. It wasn't just about rebellion. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about choosing me, maybe for the first time in my adult life. Now, the chair doesn't feel like a seat for the rejected. It feels like a monument, not to exclusion, but to freedom. I've built real connections now. Friends who don't expect anything but my time. Colleagues who respect what I bring, not what I can fund. A niece who listens without judgment. A quiet home filled with things I chose, not things I inherited. And I look back not with regret, but with clarity. They showed me who they were. But more importantly, they showed me who I didn't want to be. I don't miss the calls. I don't miss the fake gratitude. I don't miss being needed for everything, but never wanted for who I am. That rejection, that empty seat beside the statue, used to feel like shame. Now, it feels like the beginning. Because if they hadn't excluded me, I might still be paying their bills, begging for approval I never truly needed. But they did. And that moment, that quiet little fracture in the hallway, became the door I walked through to reclaim my life. No, I don't regret walking away. I regret not doing it sooner.